Woman, an in-depth exploration of the world of women today with Sandra Elkin.
Good evening and welcome to Woman. Tonight we're going to continue our discussion of the controversies and challenges facing the women's movement. My guest is Betty Friedan, perhaps the one person most responsible for today's women's movement. Betty is the author of The Feminine Mystique, which is now out in a new 10th anniversary edition and has sold over 3 million copies throughout the world. Betty Friedan is founder and first president of the National Organization for Women. Welcome to Women, Betty.
Nice to be back.
One of the things that people say we continuously underestimate is the power of the women's movement. Do you think that's true?
Oh, yes. I mean, and in this last year even, it is growing, the identification, the sense of how it's affecting people's lives. And the young women, you know, who encountered it first in high school or college, or the old women who are, you know, doing the part-time work behind the sales counters in the department stores, women you meet in airports or in suburban situations or just anywhere. And I travel a lot, you know, around the country. And it's like it's so important to them. And they really do expect something, are able to expect something in more and different life. And as a result, and then they say to me, they tell me about their problems, and you know, the problems are great. I mean, anybody would be kidding it oneself to not say that. And they say, oh, we've got these new problems, and they're just, you know, or they're getting laid off, or they have a whole new situation in their families, or they're divorced, or they're this, or they're that. And they say, and we, you know, but they say, you know, then they go like this, you see, and they say, but it's so important. And the women's movement, and you know, that my new book that will come out, we call it Change My Life, which is what they say. And they say, and it has to keep on. It has to keep on. And so that there's this sense of it's so much bigger than any of us.
Well, there was a recent Harris poll which said 63% of the American people approve of the goals of the women's movement, which is to improve the status of women.
That was an incredible amount. You know, it's at 63% approved and like 20-something disapproved. I mean, and it increased enormously.
In 1970 it was only 42%.
No, it was this huge increase from 70 to 75. And then they said only something percent, I don't remember what, felt that all of the women's organizations were doing their best thing for the women's movement. But even that had increased, the ones that felt that had doubled since 70. And so then it makes people like me feel this awful sense of, you know, responsibility. Like, I mean, this is real. This is happening, and we have no right to mess it up. We absolutely have no right to underestimate the power of the women's movement to make the changes that every woman needs.
Or to misuse it.
What?
Or to misuse it.
Or misuse it. To misuse it for anybody, or to let it be co-opted, or let it be ripped off, or let it be infiltrated, or let it be paralyzed, you know, or let it be used even for any one Susie Q's internal power trip. You know, many individual women learn leadership and become leaders, and many individual women will advance professionally and will have new aspirations as a result of the women's movement, and right on. That's what should happen. But the women's movement is more important than any of them, and more important to that it stay with integrity, its responsibility to the needs and the problems of the women in the mainstream of American society. And because that's where it is now. And I mean, they're real problems. They're not glamorous problems. They're just real, like getting hired and getting laid off, or because women were the last hired and they are the first fired in lots of universities and other places where they don't have tenure, or companies. And then should women fight against seniority? No, I don't think so. But then they've got to have new allies with labor unions on the, you know, on the real problems of the question of jobs and full employment, or the crisis in the family, because women are suddenly taking themselves seriously as people. Does that mean that all women are then going to abandon their needs to love, be loved, man, home, family, children, all that? No. But it means that there are real problems, and we got to deal with the reality.
Well, it seems to me there are problems from within and problems from without. And that no one seems to be paying a lot of attention to the problems from within. I mean, the press is paying a certain amount of attention to it. You read an article in the Washington Post or the Time magazine or the New York Times. And one of the things that's being said a great deal is about infiltration. And there are people who feel very strongly that women's movement has been infiltrated. There are people that feel that that's not important, that there are more important problems to deal with. How do you feel about that?
I distrust anyone who is trying to gloss over the fact that the women's movement has been infiltrated. The women's movement has, in fact, been infiltrated.
Now, how do we know that for
we,
sure?
we know it. Yeah, not, you know, I might have suspected it for a long time and then thought, oh, well, you know, I'm not going to, I mean, you know, and a lot of us might have felt that way. But we now know it because it's been testified in these hearings that the Church Committee and others that have been investigating the misuses of the CIA and the FBI in Washington and that Rockefeller Commission, you know, has said the women's movement was one of the target. I mean, logically, why wouldn't it have been the largest movement for social change that's still extant in the 70s? Only one that hasn't been completely destroyed, and there's every attempt being made to destroy it. And recently someone testified that again and again the FBI sent in agents to the women's movement. Well, all came back and said all they're about is they want equality and this and that in society and equality in society, and still they sent more agents in. Now, we who were in it were aware again and again of something going wrong, and it would drive us nuts because sometimes those who seem to be using the most radical of slogans or rhetoric or tactics would be somehow messing up the movement. They would be paralyzing it. They would be dividing it. They would be keeping us from accomplishing the real thing that we were trying to do to change society. And so they would be thinking to play, we would feel, I mean, can women really be that dumb, you know, that we keep messing ourselves up this way? And now I don't think that women are that dumb. I think that we emerged in this enormously powerful movement for social change. And it does have big economic and political implications. And therefore, the forces of reaction that still control this country, that still control its economic establishment, its military establishment, and much of its political establishment, that they had to paralyze us, infiltrate us, co-opt us, divert us. And they didn't quite succeed in doing it, but they've done a lot of damage.
When you were in Mexico City, did you see any manifestation of that?
Oh, sure. In Mexico City, it was much more obvious than it was in the U.S. because Mexico City, I mean, there the reactionary forces that were manipulating, you know, used more overt tactics so that, for instance, I was followed physically. My life was threatened. You know, I mean, men with guns brought women in and disrupted, you know, the meeting where the women did get together on the basic gains, the basic questions of equality for women. But International Women's Year was a disgrace because it was an insult to women the world over. I mean, it was used and misused, and then finally that Zionism thing was attached to it, so that the women were being used as a trial balloon to use the UN, this agency that should have been the hope of the world, that rose out of a war that saw 6 million Jews put in the gas chambers, and then women used as the first trial balloon to use the UN as an agency to fan on a new wave of persecution of the Jews. And that's the final blow as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it used the UN against, it misused the women. And it didn't do any service to the cause of women, that International Women's Year. But to go back to the U.S., because it's really only what's happening in our own country that we can really know about and feel all that responsible for. A similar but more subtle thing may have been going on here to divert energies from the really gut economic questions about equality for women, and that are not that difficult. You know, I mean, they don't imply extremist things, really. They just imply a whole new sense of yourself as a person, whether you are a housewife, whether you are a secretary, whether you are a stewardess, whether you are a college teacher, whether you are a professional in any field, whether you are a high school student, or whether you're a grandmother, whether you're married or whether you're divorced. There's a whole new changes in society when you really just assume that American women are entitled to the equal values of American society. But this was happening and is happening. And the Lou Harris poll shows it, that there's this enormous identification of women with the movement. But then this threatens those that have been easily manipulating women in the past, you know, politicians, demagogues, dictators, priests, reactionary politicians of the right, and the reactionary commissars of the far left. They've just used women. You know, they've manipulated them to buy things they don't need, to vote out of their fears, vote reactionary forces into power, to, you know, just accept passively doctrines that may even be inimical to them. Now, when women take their own responsibility for their own lives, their own power to control their destiny and they begin to do it by confronting the situation of their own lives, as we've been doing in the women's movement, that's not 10% of the people. That's like 51, 52, 53%. And that's big political business. And what went on in Mexico to mess up International Women's Year, and what's been going on this year to block the ERA, or to try to undo the right of women to abortion, you know, these things, to infiltrate the women's movement, to infiltrate my own organization now, to divert it, to make it even buy a slogan out of the mainstream, when in fact what's happening is in the mainstream. I mean, all of this, and then the testimony that the women's movement has been infiltrated by agents. See, I think it's terribly important to keep alive the women's movement, and that to keep moving on in the mainstream. So anything that diverts, paralyzes, is wrong.
How much do you think, and I wasn't aware of this for a long time until I started talking to people like you and some other people who seemed to be concerned about it. And I also talked to a lot of people who felt it was nonsense and that we shouldn't pay any attention to it. But how aware do you think is, and I hate using this term, but the average woman, the woman who is not involved at the level that you are, I mean, how aware is...
You think she's dumb?
Absolutely not.
I don't. I mean, see, I get these letters, in this last month or two, phone calls, are people, women come up to me, you know, and you know, if they recognize. And this is what's making me feel like I'm going to get an ulcer if I don't have one already, because I'm so worried about what to do. And they feel the concern, and they say, I mean, they know the women's movement is important to them, and they feel uneasy. They sense something is going wrong, and they don't know what it is. And there's so much pain here, you see, because the women's movement is important to us all. We had this slogan, sisterhood is powerful, and it is. So we don't want to, it is terribly difficult for any of us, even if we have the proof spread out right here, that somebody that is supposedly spoken in the name of the women's movement is a CIA agent. Even if we had that proof spelled out, it would be just terribly difficult for us to face it in our gut, because face it in our gut. You don't face something in your gut, but you know what I mean, to come to grips with it, because it means that we've got to, I mean, this is a whole new security when we've been insecure, the women's movement itself. Then we have to recognize that even the women's movement, we have to take responsibility for. It's just not going to happen. You know, it's been infiltrated. It's just too much of a big business. It's too much to rip off, to be infiltrated. Trust isn't automatic just because a woman is a woman. Women can be misused, bought off. Trust has to be earned. And it's our responsibility to save this movement and to continue to...
Well, you're Betty Friedan, and you started it all. And you're getting the pressure now to do something from the people who feel as you do. Do you know what to do?
I don't. I feel the same conflicts that you know, you almost feel. I know how important the women's movement is. I mean, you know, I might personally want to think about a lot of other things at this moment, you know, and move off and say, I've done my bit and so on and so on. But my God, it's, you know, it's not only my baby, but it's all of us. And it's changed my life. It's like changed everybody else. And we cannot let it die. And also, I know more than any of you, well, you know it maybe, but a lot of how very big it is, how much bigger it is than any of the organizations that are called Women's Lib have begun to tap, how absolutely essential, the identification of women with the women's movement is in every walk of American life, whether you call, if you want to use words like class, middle class, sure, most American women are middle class, white and black and brown and old and young and gray-haired and, you know, junior high and little girls in the little league and women that are getting divorced and the women that are having children and women that have new aspirations in school and women that are who are housewives and whose husbands have been supporting them and are suddenly waking up to the fact that they've been living in an illusory security. And yet what? And change is happening to everybody. And the women's movement is essential. And yet,
now,
what are we going to do? I mean, are we going to...
okay, I heard that, not heard, I read in Time magazine, or the Time or Newsweek, that you had a meeting in New Orleans with some other women. And there have been a lot of rumors about that meeting, a secret meeting to start a new organization. Would you want to clear some of that up?
It wasn't. That's not... Well, you might say that the crisis of the women's movement are the real questions that are agonizing everybody in the women's movement. Now, if they have any sense, they're going to be agonized, in my opinion. We can't just brush it under the table anymore. It became public with the defeat of the ERA in New York and New Jersey. That came in the same period of time as a takeover of the NOW organization, which I helped start, by a group that had publicly committed itself to take the organization out of the mainstream into the revolution, whereas most people would feel that the revolution is really what we're doing to change the mainstream. So that this obsolete kind of rhetoric of another era and the tactics at Philadelphia, that upset people. Then there was a so-called strike against the system, which 1 week before the ERA came up on the ballot, and it didn't even work. It wasn't even well organized enough to be that. And at the same time as real women are being laid off and energies weren't being diverted, the energies that were being diverted were not being spent on the economic problems of real women, the women that are the movement's responsibility, and the political responsibilities of getting the ERA finally, ratified by 76 necessary. Well, none of us want to face the ugly reality that the movement's been infiltrated, that something is happening to destroy our mainstream organization. I have felt, with some pride of motherhood perhaps, but now the organization that I helped start, and I still have enormous faith in the members of NOW, in the 700 chapters, in the suburbs and the city of this nation, that they are still in the mainstream and they are still committed to the real problems and the real goals of women who want equality, and they want it really. They don't want it just in terms of a rhetoric. So the problem is, how are you going to face the fact that the organization may have been co-opted, infiltrated, taken over, and being destroyed, with the reality, with also your loyalty to the organization, with the sense it's what we have and it's been the main thing we have, and yet you face this fact that if the Lou Harris poll showed that nearly 3/4 of those voters out there supported it, and yet even given that there was enormous amounts of money spent by the enemies of equal rights amendment in New York and New Jersey, and enormous amounts of money that we don't know where it came from spent in infiltrating the Philadelphia Convention of NOW to keep its energies diverted on non-essential questions, what do we do? What do we do? And, like they're coming to me. I don't want to start another organization inimical to NOW if there's any hope of saving NOW as a mainstream organization. But my commitment is to the women of the country and to the women's movement and to the members of NOW as members of the women's movement. And there was this great uneasy urge, uneasy feeling. We have to have the women's movement in 1976. We can't let it be destroyed. And we have to keep moving forward and out into the mainstream and not let our energies be paralyzed in internal, made-up disputes or power struggles. And that's what's worrying me, you see.
Because that's really happening, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, there are enormous power
That's what's
struggles.
happening. And it's still happening, you see. How do you get beyond that? How do you transcend the polarization? How do you use the, how do you meet the needs and interests and uh, of the women and men, because it isn't just women, it's men too, more and more supporting it. But the dramatic increase in the last, according to the Harris poll, the dramatic increase in the last 5 years is in the consciousness of women. And we have done that job, And I don't think that's reversible. On the one hand, I can say, well, all right, they could destroy one organization or another, and the women's movement will still go on because it's here. But the organization is important too. We know that, So what do we do? What do we do? My thought had been something like, you asked me about the Philadelphia, the
New Orleans,
and I got digressed. What happened was that after Philadelphia, the convention of now, and after the defeat of the ERA, some people of the newly, very concerned in now, and they came to see me with questions like this, and they wanted. I have not been involved with the internal organizational struggles or problems of now, as long as it was committed to the statement of purpose for which I organized it. The full equality for women and full equal partnership with men, and to take action to bring women into the mainstream. I've been doing my bit, writing and lecturing and teaching, and I haven't been concerned with the organizational battles. But they came to me with a sort of SOS, and so they said, when will you be in the middle of the country next? And so I said I was going to give this lecture in New Orleans, which I did. I was lecturing at a college in New Orleans. And they said, will you come a day early, and if we meet you in a motel, and we'll discuss all this. And so some of them came, and we just discussed these problems and the crisis and what we thought had happened and what could be done. And some of them there were from a independent sort of group in now, and they were concerned with what's going on within the organization now. And since I don't know all that much about that, I was concerned more with the larger questions and the fact that it leaked out to the newspapers and that such a fuss was made about it. Well, first I was sort of amazed by that, and then I thought, well, look, it is important to the women of America.
It didn't just sort of leak out. It was on the front page of the New York Times.
Well, I know. And you know why? Because the women's movement is big business. It's not only big business in the terms that a company or a corporation could move in to rip it off to sell something, or to move in to block it to keep from paying women certain wages or pension funds or whatever. But it's a big political phenomenon that some political forces, reactionary ones, might want to block because it could otherwise change the whole political complexion here, and other people for just little power trips might want to, rip off or co-opt. But it's an enormous phenomenon. It's unprecedented. We ourselves don't really understand it fully about, where, the enormity of it, the fact that so many women's lives are changed, are facing new problems. See, that's what concerns me, that we have the responsibility to them. And therefore, I'm getting mad. See, I'm getting mad again. I'm getting mad at us, ourselves, for letting ourselves be paralyzed,
Are you interested in feedback?
Yes.
How accessible are you?
Well,
how accessible do you want to be?
Look, I don't know what to do, to tell you the honest truth. I have a feeling there's so much rip-off and so much co-opting going on, and so much manipulating of differences. I'm terrified of taking any step that will exacerbate differences, and yet I do not think that we can deny the reality that our movement, that people are trying to destroy our women's movement when we need it most, and when its support is so enormous. It's nearly 3 out of 4 of the people of America. What is wrong with us that we're not using this support?
Do you want people to tell you
yes.
what they think?
Well, now, can they write to you? Can
We'd
they
be happy to forward anything.
No, but look, what should we do? Should we try to use the year 76 to somehow dedicate ourselves to get that Equal Rights Amendment? For one thing, I do not buy for one instant that there isn't the majority choice. Let's figure out how we can, in every community, I don't care what organization you're a member of, if you say we about the women's movement, and I know that that's most women in America, how we can have retreats and advances toward the mainstream in every community with existing organizations or without them, or bringing them all together or whatever, but without getting into these silly rhetorical squabbles or power battles, and say, get the Equal Rights Amendment ratified in '76, deal with the fact that women are being laid off, deal with the new crisis in the family, and what are we going to do to move on with the women's movement and not let it be destroyed like the other movements of social change have been done in America. And if you've got any ideas about that, and if you're interested in a movement to save that without getting, sucked up into any new divisive thing, I'd like to hear, because I don't know.
I hope you get some response. I really do. I hope women let you know how they feel, because obviously it's a problem. Another thing, we only have minutes, a couple of minutes left. The Harris poll, 1 minute left, I'm told. The Harris poll indicated that people are much more interested in the issues and practical advice than the rhetoric. And
Yeah.
it's important.
The real problem. See, the rhetoric that tries to make, say, woman is a class oppressed by another class, the men. I mean, men are interested too. The new problems man isn't even the enemy here. But the real problems are the ones that we are not sufficiently addressing. The problems of women who work because they have to. And that's most women. They work because they have to earn the money for the family or for themselves. And the problem of the women that have been housewives and are going to fear they may lose the security of a man who's been supporting them, because divorces are happening all over the place, or they may have to, because their child rearing years are over, move back into a very competitive world, and who's going to have them and on what basis, and they're afraid. Well, we'd be kidding ourselves if we didn't admit that we're afraid too of new changes. How are we going to deal with all the fears that we also have that the changes have brought about, and accept also our needs for love, our needs for life, our needs to not only be people on our own right, but to really love our kids and our husbands, or get along alone, or have homes, or have
Betty,
let it work toward life for all of us, and that's what we need to do.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for watching, and good night.
Woman was produced by WNED-TV, which is solely responsible for its content, and was funded by public television stations, the Ford Foundation, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.